Welcome to the Planet Trillion Trees podcast. I'm Eva Monheim.
And I'm Hal Rosner. We are both certified arborists through the International Society of Arboriculture. The purpose of our podcast is to encourage tree planting and proper tree care for our urban forests, which include neighborhoods, parks, and other open spaces.
We will also cover a myriad of tree topics, including the important role trees play in relationship to the climate crisis. Thank you for joining us.
Verdant Earth Educators provides dynamic in-person training and online learning opportunities for environmental and horticultural businesses. Owned by ISA-certified arborists and former university faculty, the Verdant Earth Educator team provides consultations on tree care and recommends climate-resilient opportunities for your valued green spaces. Verdant Earth Educators is all about seeding knowledge for success. Find Verdant Earth Educators at verdanteartheducators.com.
Monheim Microphones designs and handcrafts top-tier studio microphones and preamps right here in the United States in Hollywood, California. Their incredible line of innovative microphones and designs are used around the world by everyone from podcasters to top-charting record producers and singers. They recently released their new royalty microphone, Monheim Microphones Unparalleled Excellence, MonheimMicrophones.com. This podcast is being recorded on April 26, 2024. Cyrus Copeland, a writer and nonprofit pioneer, planted his first tree as a tribute to his father, a red oak on the grounds of Valley Forge. Year after year, he returned to the tree, but it wasn't until Cyrus traveled to the West Bank and witnessed the deep relationship between Palestinians and their olive trees that an idea sparked. Could planting trees bring prosperity and balance to a high-conflict region? Collaborating with the Palestinian Farmers Union, he launched Treedom for Palestine, harnessing the power of the olive tree as a catalyst for change. Copeland's dedication to civil engagement stems from his parents, educators from Iran and America, who instilled in him the value of fostering understanding among diverse communities. Cyrus began a decade-long career on Madison Avenue developing strategies for clients like Kodak, Chrysler, and Chase, but found his true calling as a writer and social change advocate. His most recent book, Off the Radar by Penguin, won him the Chautauqua Prize, and his writings have been featured in publications such as the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Slate, NPR, and BBC. Beyond his literary achievements, Cyrus is also a sought-after speaker. Cyrus is an alum of Haverford College, Villanova University, and Cornell University. Welcome to the Planet Trillion Trees podcast, Cyrus. We're delighted that you could be with us today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've listened to you guys for a couple of years now, and it's nice to finally meet you face to face.
We're thrilled that you're an avid listener and been on the journey with us.
I actually take you guys with me when I walk the Haverford College Nature Trail. So you guys are talking about trees. I'm in trees. Just been a lovely experience.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. You know, we were glad that you reached out to us and asked to be on the podcast because we want to find out more about your organization, which I think is very apropos for the time. And we want to find out a little bit about your background because you've been to 3 of the universities here in the Philadelphia region. Can you give us a little bit of background and then tell us how you came up with the idea of Treedom for Palestine?
Yes, I'd be happy to. In addition to heading up Treedom for Palestine, I'm a writer. I've published 4 books ranging from collections of eulogies of famous people to my last book, which is a memoir I wrote about growing up in Iran during the revolution. The book I'm writing right now took me to Jerusalem in exploration of this idea of tikkun olam, which you may know. It means heal the earth or heal the planet. Mm-hmm. And I love that idea, as I'm sure you guys do for all the obvious reasons. It's a very timely one. But I had arrived in Jerusalem at a very tense time. So there I was on my first day. I was standing in the Temple Mount, or as Muslims call it, Haram al-Sharif. And this fellow comes up to me and he starts talking about olive trees. And he's got a scrapbook and he's showing me pictures of olive trees in the West Bank throughout history. And the more he talks, the more I realize that the Palestinian relationship to olive trees isn't like any other culture. It's cultural, it's spiritual, it's economic, it's religious, it's artistic, it's legal, it's geopolitical. And for them, the olive tree is, I don't know if you ever saw that movie Avatar, it's kind of like the Tree of Souls, that deep. So there I was in my first day in the holiest city in the world and standing on the temple. And this guy breaks out a scrapbook and he starts talking to me. And for me, it's kind of like an angel's singing moment for me. As a writer, I'm trained to know when ideas visit me is the best way that I can put it. It's like a cocktail of goosebumps and curiosity and electricity. So let me back up now and say that I planted a tree for my father. It was the first and only tree that I've ever planted. Unlike you and most of your guests, I am a relative newbie when it comes to my enthusiasm for trees. The tree I planted for my dad, I planted it in Valley Forge in his memory. And I would return to the tree often with my mom and my sister to see how it was doing and check up on it. And I realized for better or for worse that I was now in a relationship with this tree. I cared what it looked like, what was happening, what was going on with it. That relationship is nothing compared to the Palestinian relationship to their olive trees, which runs deep in history and their culture. They just really love their trees. So that day in Jerusalem, I listened. But it wasn't until I visited the West Bank and I came across a small olive tree farm that had been planted there. It was in the middle of nowhere, but it had been planted very strategically by the farmer and by the Palestinian Farmers Union to confront all the challenges of farming under the occupation. And there are many challenges to farmers like that. And I thought to myself, this farm of olive trees is so simple. It's very inspiring. It was very productive. It was smart in its design. And I kind of fell in love with the idea about how trees can be agents of change and prosperity in a high conflict zone. And that initial interest that I had in olive trees kind of came to a full gallop. It's funny, I really had an epiphany as I was standing in the middle of this little farm. I knew that this idea claimed me. I knew that I would return to the US and multiply the work that I had seen on that very small parcel of land, using trees as agents of balance and prosperity in high conflict zones. And that's basically how the idea of Treedom for Palestine and the idea of planting instead of fighting for change began.
That's really very poignant. And I can relate to the goosebump thing because I have the same things happen to me when I know that I'm getting a message from somewhere.
You know it, right? You feel it.
You know it. It's almost like getting hit over the head.
I'm having a little bit of goosebumps talking to you guys right now. I don't know what that is.
I think I have become more connected with olive trees in the last 10 years of my life because I have a son-in-law from Tunisia and the olive trees are very important there as well. It becomes a communal thing where everybody comes to press their olives, I guess is the proper terminology, and then bottling the oils and canning their food together. The whole idea of community. You know, we grew up that way in our family where canning and processing food and growing food was an important thing. The whole idea of that process is critical for not only success of a family, but also success of a community. And when you get a message like that from someone coming up to you and talking to you and showing you a scrapbook, that to me it's life-changing. It's life-changing.
Thanks for saying that, Eva. I relate to what you're saying. I'm curious as to whether or not you've actually tasted the olive oil from Tunisia.
Oh, yes. He brings it back every time he comes back here to the States.
What is the taste of it? How would you describe it?
It's light. It's smooth.
Okay.
If you had to drink a glass of it, you could. It's very clean looking.
Yeah.
And once you've had fresh olive oil, it's like nothing else.
It's just a life-changing experience. It's more than culinary. It's something that you really feel. I didn't understand it. So the olive oil in the West Bank, the Holy Land, is a little bit different from the Tunisian variety. It's heavier, it's kickier, it's more peppery, I would say. Mm-hmm. But you really taste not just the trees, but the land and the effort and the soil. It all kind of comes up in this lovely experience of having it either on a salad or with za'atar or with bread, however you do it.
Right.
I was aware of the Tunisian connection to olive trees as well.
There's something about a tree in connection with people that is very, very strong. And as you were saying, the connection goes way back. And I really do believe that that's where we got the whole idea of a family tree, from the idea of an olive tree being the first visual structure of a family tree. Like, these are the parents who planted the roots, and these are the children are the leaves, and then the fruits come on, and then more children, and, the whole idea of all that. And that, to me, is very deeply embedded in a culture. It's not superfluous. It is something that can't be described. It's like the feeling that they talk about in spirituality, that when you put your feet on the ground, you are grounded. There are some people who are singers that won't sing on anything but bare wood floors and bare feet, because they are grounded in that connection to Mother Earth. So it has a lot of not only spiritual, but a feeling that you get. It's a feeling that you feel inside.
I hadn't made that connection to olive trees and the family tree, but it's kind of a perfect metaphor in a way. And when you consider that the olive tree has an astonishing 500-year lifespan, usually, that's like their average lifespan, that's 15 generations of people that grow up with that tree, that are supported by that tree, for whom that tree is a mother or a daughter or a sibling. That kind of relationship is intense, and it carries through multiple generations.
It does. And you can't help but think that, that not having that tree is like not being rooted.
So that's one of the challenges that Palestinian farmers face, the not having the tree part. Their trees are under relatively constant attack by settlers. Last year, I think it was over 2,000 olive trees had been vandalized or destroyed. That's one of the things that they're contending with, particularly right now, since the war began in October. Settler violence against farmers and against trees is up astonishingly 400% in the West Bank. So the thing that Palestinians deeply love about their culture is the thing that is also exceedingly vulnerable right now from an agricultural perspective.
They can't pick themselves up and move.
Well, that's the interesting part of all this. And it's one of the reasons that I really love this idea, is that it's not a matter of that they can't pick themselves up and move, but that migration is one of the real challenges that we as human beings are facing across multiple cultures and countries right now. But by rooting a farm, by protecting that farm, by giving the farmer the tools that they need to help that farm thrive, we're not just not helping them not move, but we're actually encouraging them to stay put and get rooted in this territory and land that perhaps has been handed down from family to family over, many, many years. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the West Bank right now, you'll see that a lot of the trees that are planted that are unprotected, oftentimes that's because the farmer doesn't have the tools and resources to be able to protect them effectively. And what we do is we'll go in, we'll plant our Treedom farms, and then we'll surround it with steel fencing to make sure that the farmer and the trees are also protected and survive.
One of the things I worry about is when there's a war like that whole plant communities are wiped out. And what is there that may be rare or may go extinct because of conflict? And it could be a variety of olive that is nowhere else in the world. Just like people, we carry these lines of information. And when that line is broken, there's a difficult time reconnecting. And I think that that's one of the things I think about when you're talking about the trees. How do they continue to propagate? Who's propagating them? How are they going to continue if there's really nothing left to propagate from?
So the trees that we plant are native trees. They're a variety called Nabali. They're very hardy and drought resistant. Mm-hmm. And we buy them from Palestinian nurseries in the West Bank. The trees that we plant are typically 2 to 3 years old. And we'll plant 250 of them on a single Treedom farm. And we plant all over the West Bank. So from the beginning of that process, it injects money into the West Bank economy and continues generating money for farmers. You talk about a life and a landform and a culture that is threatened right now. And olive trees, in as much as they're very central to the Palestinian identity, are part of that definition and part of this equation. I was shocked to kind of realize that the contribution of agriculture to the West Bank GDP has fallen from 40% in the 1970s to a current all-time low of 6%, I think it is.
Wow.
Right now.
Gave me the chills.
Yeah. And so the extent to which we can help prop that back up in a very meaningful way, which encourages farmers to claim their land, to harvest it, to honor it, a connection that goes back for as long as they've had that land, and make it sustainable in the ways that the farms that we design are sustainably designed, is the extent to which we're talking about what it really means to plant instead of fight for change. Well, so how does change happen? In the West Bank right now, there's a dichotomy of, it's a kind of like this idea of fight or flee. Mm-hmm. We're reversing that by saying, don't fight. Well, fight if you want to, but these are farmers that we're talking about, right? Fighting isn't really in their DNA. Planting is. And by literally putting down roots, we are helping them reverse migratory trends from agricultural lands into the city. We're reinforcing the fact that this is actually a viable, tenable thing that lasts for multiple generations, that youth can get involved in. And so by acting locally, we're helping reverse unfortunate global trends, not only insofar as migration goes, but also in a way climate change, because planting is, as we all know, is also a form of climate action.
Wow.
Just a couple things in terms of the cultivation end of olives, Cyrus. I guess I'm coming at it from the perspective of an arborist. Are they trees that require a lot of inputs, interventions in order to get healthy crops? How soon do they produce olives after planting? And what are the requirements in terms of supplemental irrigation?
So great question. And that is, again, one of the ways in which the Treedom farms that we design speak specifically to the needs of the trees and the challenges of what it means to farm under the occupation. The trees that we plant are 2 to 3 years old. They'll require fertilizer, of course. And then we will supplementally irrigate those trees for 2 to 3 months out of every year. We find that by supplementally irrigating them, the trees will fruit sooner and more bountifully than they would if they weren't irrigated. So typically it might take an abali tree 5-6 years to fruit. Because we supplementally irrigate those trees during the summertime, and water, by the way, is a very precious resource on the West Bank. There's a lot of water scarcity concerns. So by irrigating them, they will typically fruit in 4 years instead of 6. And they will fruit in a way which is, as I mentioned, more bountifully. So the first harvest of a Treedom farm will typically result in about $3,000 of olive oil sales for the farmer. And that amount will continue to double from year to year until the trees mature at 15-ish, at which point that farm of 250 olive trees will produce a crop of about $36,000 worth of olive oil. So the supplemental irrigation part is factored into how we design the farms. So we'll not only buy and plant 250 Nabali olive trees for our farmers, not only fence the property to protect the trees and the farmer from any kind of violence, but we will also install an irrigation system that allows the farmer to kind of do this in an easy way.
The supplemental irrigation, is that tank watering or are you doing in-ground irrigation?
It depends on the resources that the farmer has access to. So if they have access to a water line, we'll connect with that water line. And if they don't have access to a water line, we'll buy them a tank. That's where it starts to get a little bit expensive for them. So we will buy them the tank and the system. They will have to pay for the water as needed during the summer months.
Yeah, and I feel perhaps we're backtracking a little bit, so I apologize. I feel like we haven't asked you the basic question. Can you tell us organizationally what the mission of Treedom Farms is? Who are you and how long have you been around, and the basics?
We are a small nonprofit that works with the Palestinian Farmers Union, a collective of 16,000 small-scale farmers in the West Bank that are dedicated to nonviolent change and sustainable planting. We work with them. They're our partner on the ground to plant what we affectionately refer to as a Treedom farm. That Treedom farm is 250 olive trees, irrigated and fenced for protection for vulnerable Palestinian farmers in the West Bank.
Got you. Are you dealing with anything in terms of blight? I know in Italy, the olive farmers were struggling with some pretty serious decline. Is your variety, is Nabali showing some resistance to some of the stem cankers?
Thus far, that hasn't been an issue for us. And so before Treedom for Palestine came into the picture, multiplying the work of the Palestinian Farmers Union, the Palestinian Farmers Union has planted what they call it model farms. We call them freedom farms. And thus far, all 59 of the farms that they have planted across the West Bank are still standing and in the process of producing olive oil.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And indulge me with one last slightly goofy question, but maybe not. But I remember when we had the gentleman on from Qatar, I couldn't wait to find out what happened to the pits from the dates. Do olive pits have any secondary use?
Oh, that's interesting. Not to my knowledge. I know that the tree itself isn't only about producing olive oil. Oftentimes, the unusable wood that is cut or pruned from the tree will be used for sculpture. There's an artistic use to it as well. But I don't know about the pits. That's a good question, Hal. I'm going to run that by my partner at the Palestinian Farmers Union.
I think we probably would have heard. Eva, have you heard of anything?
I know about avocados. They make tea. They make tea with it, but not olives. The wood of olive makes beautiful cutting boards and tabletops and gorgeous furniture. But olive pits, no. I mean, they're growing the trees from cuttings because you got a cultivar. So they're doing cuttings or massive. Is that correct? Are they propagating from cuttings?
That is one way that when we plant it, it's a fully rooted 2-year-old tree, as I say, that we get from nurseries. Planting from cuttings is another way that we are going to start to explore over the next couple of years and see how that works out. There's not a lot of planting from cuttings that's happening in the West Bank right now.
So now the people who are raising the trees, how are they propagating? Are they from seed or are they from cutting?
They're typically from seed.
From seed?
Yeah, I believe they're typically from seed. I would have to confirm that.
Okay, so then the seeds are going to production. So we know where the seeds are going. We know where the pits are going now, Hal, into new trees.
Yeah. So I'd love to know, this is noble work, and obviously we're having this interview at a very difficult time for this region. What is your vision, big picture-wise? How big could this get? And if governments were to, buy into it and support it along with the population at large, what could Treedom Farms be doing a decade from now?
We see Treedom Farms as a way to turn a polarized Holy Land into a prosperous heartland. And our game plan is to plant 1,000 Treedom Farms over the next 10 years. I love this idea of planting rather than fighting for change for obvious reasons. And you talk about timely. As you may know, the U.S. government just unwrote a $5 billion defense budget for a war that's being fought. If even a small fraction of that were spent on planting trees instead of destructive weaponry, that would go a long way to solving the inequity and imbalance that has plagued the region for a long time. And in the process, by the way, we're not only solving local problems, we're not only encouraging peaceful coexistence and economic balance and gender equality. Oh, by the way, so that's one of the things that I also particularly love. 50% of the farms that we plant are planted for female farmers. And so we are really encouraging and fostering women to have stronger roles in the West Bank, in their families, in their communities. So that's part of the equation here. So we're not only using olive trees as agents for all of these things, but in addition to acting locally, as I mentioned, we're also helping solve two of the greater problems of migration and climate change that we're all dealing with along the way.
So can the model that you have set up for Treedom Farms, could that be a model that's taken to other countries? Not necessarily countries that might not be able to grow olives, but it could be another tree that they have a strong connection with. Is that a model you think could work in other countries as well to stabilize communities and to keep people employed, if you will, or close to the land?
Indeed, it is. And we are working with West Bank farmers, perhaps as a prototype for a more expanded version of the idea of using trees as agents of change in not just high conflict regions, but also regions where deforestation is an issue, soil degradation, economic hardship due to lack of sustainable agricultural practices. Off the top of my head, I would say maybe the Amazon basin, sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia. Again, areas where deforestation and poverty are prevalent, all could use Treedom projects to help restore the environment and bolster the economy, and also help reduce migration from the area.
Now, I was just going to ask, what do you think about possibilities for some of the other Middle Eastern countries that are struggling with drought conditions? I mean, I guess it always comes back to water.
It comes back to water. So water is one of the resources that you kind of need to manage smartly. Water resources to ensure adequate water supplies, it's essential for tree planting and growth.
Yeah.
Environmental sustainability, so that the tree that we work with in Palestine, it's the olive tree, but it has to be suitable for the local climate. The community needs to be engaged. That's a crucial aspect of projects like this. And also economic viability. Treedom projects need to be economically sustainable and provide long-term benefits like Eva was talking about, job creation or agricultural products.
What are the temperature highs for the West Bank during the warm summer months? How hot does it get?
So that's one of the areas that's kind of interesting. And climate change is an issue there right now. So the answer to that question is shifting.
Right.
And that's one of the unforeseen elements that we kind of have to contend with as we're moving through this collectively. The tree that we planted, the Nabali variety, is better suited than most to survive factors like that because it's very hardy and drought resistant. The temperatures are creeping up there. I couldn't give you an exact number. This is a conversation that I've had with the Palestinian Farmers Union, and they continue to kind of monitor this situation as it's evolving.
So what other products can come from? We talked about some of the things from the olive trees, but what other things might be planted alongside the olives that could work well in the climate that's there and provide another crop?
I'm going to answer that question from a tree perspective and also from a vegetal herbal perspective. Right. From tree perspectives, avocado does very well in that climate. Occasionally, we'll plant avocado trees alongside the olive trees because they tend to fruit sooner and provide an earlier source of income for the farmer. Citrus trees also fare well in that region. But in addition to planting trees, what we'll do for the farmers to ensure that before their trees have rooted and produced a form of income, we will plant things like thyme alongside the trees, which are irrigated with the trees and can be harvested 4 times a year so that the farmer can harvest and take to market and earn an income on these things in the meantime.
So that's one herb. There could be a lot of other herbs that haven't even been considered yet.
There are. Thyme is one of those particularly popular things because it goes into za'atar. And if you've ever had za'atar,
oh yeah,
just a delicious cocktail of flavors. And you won't find a table in Palestine without za'atar on it at some point through the day.
Right.
So it's an herb that's in demand and it's a reliable source of income for a farmer if that's the herb you choose to plant.
So what about sumac?
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Because that's where za'atar comes from, sumac.
That's another herb.
It's actually a tree or shrub.
That's right. I'm confusing it with something else.
That's okay, but it's like an actual tree shrub that could actually grow too. And that's pretty darn tough as far as weather conditions go, because I have it out my back door. I've got these big tassels on the top, that I could strip it and make za'atar from. But it can take wet, it can take dry, it can take hot, it can take cold.
I don't know the answer to this question. How many times can you harvest sumac throughout the year? Do you have any idea?
Once. It's once at the end of the season because it only breeds once. They're male and female plants. So the female will produce the large heads. They both produce heads, like what we classify as a terminal panicle. And this panicle on the male, once it pollinates, it falls apart. Where the female stays formed almost like a Christmas tree and a little bit more bulbous. And mine have been on since last year. So they stay on there. And the native population here would use it to make vitamin C juice, with hot water. So there's another...
Like a tea, yeah.
A tea. And the tea is very good because I would make it and take it into my students at school, the university, and they would be like, wow, this is really good. It's citrusy and it has a really nice flavor to it. You don't have to put sugar in it because it's a little tart, but that might be another crop that could be grown maybe even around the fence area. I was thinking, because it spreads, all the different potential that a farm could have besides the olive trees. And I'm sure the olives would love company,
Yep, indeed. I suspect that they're doing that. I do remember from my ceaseless walks through the old markets in Jerusalem, all of the spice stands that are available. They're colorful, they're delicious. Even thinking about that, I'm starting to salivate right now. I do know that the predilection for thyme is not just because of its popularity, but because of how frequently it can be harvested. It just makes it very economically sensible for the farmers to do.
So it could be dried or it could be used fresh, and probably used fresh more than dried. But, thyme.
Do you remember a couple of months ago, there was a farmer who, unfortunately, not to get too serious here, but was killed by settlers. The story made way. Yes. His name was Bilal Saleh. He was a thyme farmer, and they used to call him Bilal, the thyme farmer, all over that region. That just gives you an idea of how popular that herb is. But I like this idea of sumac, and I'm going to have a conversation about this.
And, there's other herbs too that, you think of that. And I was just kind of imagining, what if there was a saffron?
Okay. You know what? If you could.
Crocus. The crocus.
I'm going to text the director of the Farmers Union right now, and we're going to get an answer about this. Okay.
Well, in the meantime, I think for the first time in 150 episodes, I did Google while interviewing, and olive pits do seem to be usable as a fuel source.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. We learned something new. Thanks, Hal, for Googling that.
This Google is amazing.
Besides getting baby olive trees, you get fuel too.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I was thinking even like saffron, the crocus could be planted in another area, and the saffron could be collected if saffron's used a lot in the Mideast, and other things like that are really expensive that would be difficult, to grow otherwise. That would be in small quantities.
Yeah, I think that expanding the palette makes perfect sense. And as we've touched on, it's always going to be water delivery. The more water that's available, the greater diversity of plants that can be put into agricultural use. It's a marvelous concept to be talking about, especially on Arbor Day, the plants to heal the world.
I think the other thing too is that when you have more diversity, and I've done a lot of work with the farms, local community gardens around here in Philadelphia, and starting the idea of diversity and the more unusual stuff that you grow reaches a certain audience, and that audience becomes really attentive to what you're growing because you have something that maybe nobody else has in the region. And that's what I'm thinking about when I'm asking you about other things on the farm besides the olive trees.
So part of what we plan to do, Eva, is start exploring not just different ways of planting and irrigation as the situation on the ground evolves and as the climate change issue evolves, not only vis-a-vis how we plant, what we plant, but also what we plant. And down the road, that research becomes a part of how we structure ourselves moving forward. So this is very much on our mind. We've had multiple conversations with this about these very kind of issues. The water thing, Hal, is so central to the challenge there, not just because there's a water crisis in the West Bank, and there is a very well-documented crisis in the West Bank. There is an aquifer underneath the West Bank, which has enough water to sustain legally prohibited from accessing it. They can't drill wells on their own land. They certainly couldn't drill all the way down to the aquifer. And so the water availability is such a determinant of this discussion moving forward. If a farmer is forced to rely on something other than a water connection to water their crops, they will have to pay up to 30 times the price that a settler will have to pay for water. So we all have to be really super smart and creative and responsive to this evolving crisis about how we're structuring what we're doing there. And I got to hand it to the Palestinian Farmers Union. They are so incredibly good at this kind of very strategic, flexible, creative thinking.
Yeah.
How much of a rainfall do they have in this area?
During the spring months, it's wonderful. Summer is when it starts to get very difficult. And that is why the supplemental irrigation and the brand of olive tree that we plant really counts. It's also the month during which you really shouldn't be planting. But again, even that is changing. So for example, we just planted a Treedom farm for a female farmer over there. And we had to delay the planting of this farm on 3 separate occasions because of the amount of rainfall. And my partner at the Palestinian Farmers Union was scratching his head. It's like, Cyrus, this doesn't happen. We've never had this much rainfall in the month of April. So again, things are just evolving there in ways which are quite unpredictable. And water is one of those resources.
And what about water catchment basins and rain gardens, if you will, or cisterns?
Yes, that is one of the things so we're talking about water tanks for access to water when there is no water pipelines, and then rainwater wells. And about 15% of farmers have them in the West Bank. It costs quite a bit to be able to do that. I heard it was something upwards of $5,000 to do that kind of enterprise. So that money is a lot for a farmer to be able to afford that. So as I say, it's not a very popular means of irrigation right now. Mm-hmm. Then again, there's this issue of water ownership. It's very strange, but the water that falls from the sky is literally unownable by the farmers who plant the land.
What?
That's another thing. If you want to Google it, you can do that right now. That's why water is so very strategically controlled and used as a means to depopulate the region and make farming incredibly difficult for farmers to do. Yeah, what? You hear things like that and you go,
what?
Yeah.
You're just like, what? What? Oh my goodness. I couldn't put my bucket out there and collect it. That's what I would want to do. That's
legally, if push came to shove. Oh, let's see. I just got a response from my partner at the Farmers Union, and here's what he says. The herbs that they plant are this is an Arabic pronunciation. I don't even know how to pronounce it. So za'atar, we talked about mint.
Mint would be the other one. Yeah, I was thinking.
Parsley, yansun. I don't know what yansun is.
What yansun?
Al, if you want to get busy on Google, that would be a good time.
Yansun, is it spelled with Y?
Yansun, Yansoun. And he says, these are Arabic names of herbs. I will send you the English names shortly.
Parsley, we know parsley. And I'm surprised that parsley grows there, Yansun. That sounds familiar to me.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's anise.
Oh, anise. Okay. Anise. Wow. Well, this has been an education.
I wanted to ask, how often are you heading over there? Do you need to travel there to oversee? Or?
I so want to be there right now, in spite of the fact of everything. I just want to be there.
Sure.
Participate in this, to see what's happening on the ground. There's such a feeling of contentment and pride and glory in using trees as agents of change, as we've been talking about, but I can't do that. Not yet. It's my great hope to be able to visit a little bit later on this year. Yeah. And if and when it happens, I'll shoot you guys an update and tell you all about it.
How's the fundraising climate for you? Is that a nonstop effort or?
Well, sure. In as much as nonprofits are always engaged in that.
Sure.
When the war started, all of the critical attention was being focused justifiably on Gaza, and few people were doing really long-term thinking about how to make the West Bank more livable, more balanced, more prosperous. But increasingly, it's become easier to get on people's radar about that. And you see these news stories about what's happening, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And you think, what can I do? What can I do? We all are kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't presume to speak for you, but I know that a lot of people have anxiety and anger and don't know how to deal with the situation. Here's one thing that you can do. You can plant an olive tree for $30. You can plant a $250 olive tree for $7,500. That olive tree will live for 500 years. It will feed 15 successive generations. It will bring communities together for the harvest. It will ensure that planted land stays in the hands of the people who farm it. It is an agent of gender equality, of racial equality. In as much as this olive tree has been living in this area, it's also an ongoing expression of our cultural relationship that Palestinians have with trees. So here's something you can easily do, and it is something that will last. It will outlast you and me and everybody else who's listening to this show, but it is a real way to help turn this polarized Holy Land around.
Wow. Well, I feel like we want to maybe end on that beautiful overview and articulation of what you're doing and what your program is doing. I have 2 tree-related questions. What kind of tree did you plant for your dad at Valley Forge? And what's your favorite tree?
So the tree I planted for my dad at Valley Forge was a red oak. I planted it because he loved autumn and because the red oak is such a foundational thing around here. And my favorite tree, I love olive trees for all the obvious reasons, but as a writer, I hate obvious answers. So I'm going to say the magnolia tree, which has always made me smile when it comes into unapologetic bloom in the spring. I lived in New York for many decades. I have a very fond recollection of the magnolia trees behind the Metropolitan Museum in April. It was like a patch of trees on soft earth in the spring. It was this sweet scented air where I could sit myself down for hours. And behind me, the world's greatest collection of art. And in front of me, one of the greatest parks in the world. And above me, these sweetly scented magnolia trees that seemed so full of possibility and potential. And so the magnolia.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
And now I know why people say, I want to extend to you an olive branch.
Yeah. Right.
Isn't that nice? And the olive branch that we extend is a branch that's extended across oceans and continents right now.
Yeah. Very, very. What a great Arbor Day. Arbor Day everything.
It makes me the club.
Yeah.
I'm getting the goosebump feeling all over again.
Me too.
Honor to be here with you guys on this particular day. You both are such lovely ambassadors on behalf of all the cool things that trees do in this world. As I mentioned, I've listened to you for several years right now, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of this ongoing conversation. You guys.
That's very kind.
Again, I want to thank you for reaching out. We really are delighted that you were on the podcast. It's been eye-opening to know what's going on in the world and people like you that are making a difference.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. If any of your listeners want to find out a little bit more about what we do, we have a website. It's Treedom. That's Treedom with a T for Palestine.org. They can read a little bit more if they choose to contribute. There's an opportunity for them to do that there too. And I want to thank you both again for doing what you do in the world and for being who you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cyrus.
Take care.
Thank you so much. It's good to talk to y'all.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Plant a Trillion Trees podcast is edited by Andromedan Recordings in Hollywood, California.